At 16, Vicky was already carrying the weight of the world on her shoulders, though few knew it. On the outside, she appeared like any other high school junior, quiet, smart, and a bit withdrawn. But beneath that calm facade was a storm brewing. Her home life, once warm, had turned cold and suffocating over the years. The walls of their small apartment seemed to close in with each passing day, as her mother's drinking spiraled out of control and her father's temper became unpredictable. Vicky had learned to keep her head down to avoid confrontation, but the emotional and financial toll was unbearable. They were struggling, no money, no stability, and certainly no love. Her parents' arguments echoed through several nights, filled with blame and resentment. The expectations on her were unrealistic. Her mother told her she had to fix the mess they created, as if a 16-year-old could turn things around. Her mother would say, "Vicky, we have done our part in raising you, and as you can see, things are not so good for us. Now it is your turn to continue from where we stopped." The constant pressure weighed heavily on her. Vicky wanted to escape, to get out of that life, but she had no means to do so. Secondary school felt like a joke when survival at home took precedence over everything else. One day, after school hours, while hawking fruits in a nearby market, Vicky overheard a conversation between strangers. They were talking about a simple yet seemingly harmless scam: stealing someone's credit card information to make online purchases. "It's so easy," one of them said. "No one even knows. You just need to be careful." Vicky's heart raced as she listened. At first, she dismissed the idea, but as the days passed, the thought gnawed at her. She was already living a life of quiet desperation. What if this could solve all her problems? She thought to herself. After all, her parents don't have enough to afford a good life for her. What if this was her chance to finally break free? She could even go to school with the money, even get a better house and live in comfort. Vicky didn't start out wanting to hurt anyone. She didn't plan to destroy lives. She just wanted to escape. The first time she swiped a credit card number from an unsuspecting online shopper, she felt a rush. It was a small purchase at first, an expensive dress she would never be able to afford on her own, delivered straight to her doorstep. Her parents were having their normal arguments and didn't notice when Vicky received her package. She told herself it was a one-time thing, just a small indulgence for herself after everything she had endured. But the cycle grew quickly. The stolen goods began to pile up. Gadgets, clothes, luxury items, all with someone else's money. Each purchase brought a temporary relief, a brief sense of control. She paid for rent and eventually moved out of her parents' house. Her parents, who always put pressure on her, didn't care much as long as she gave them money. She bought groceries and stocked up the house for them before leaving. But deep down, Vicky had a secret she could hold close, something that made her feel in control in a world that had always been chaotic. Vicky started seeing the thought of going to school as a waste of time. She thought to herself, "I'll just buy a result. School is stressful anyway." Vicky's choice of lifestyle began to tell on her. She started feeling paranoid, more isolated. She began abusing alcohol and drugs as frustration started to kick in. The thrill of getting away with her crimes began to fade as she became increasingly aware of the risk, but she also felt trapped. Each transaction felt like a lifeline, a fragile thread she clung to in the midst of a storm. The shame of what she was doing weighed heavily on her, but it was nothing compared to the shame she had always felt living in her broken home. One day, Vicky ran out of luck. The bank called her mother about a suspicious transaction, and the address was traced to that house. Within minutes, the police were knocking on their door. Vicky's mother explained to the police that Vicky no longer lived there, but she visits often. Vicky's mother was asked to call her, which she did with shaky hands, and in no time, Vicky was traced and she was caught. Her online purchases traced back to her. The guilt and fear hit her like a tidal wave, but she felt almost relieved at the same time. The secret was out. In the weeks that followed, Vicky was arrested and charged with fraud. Her parents' disappointment was palpable, but it was a cold, distant kind of disappointment, more of an inconvenience for them than true concern for their daughter. They knew they had pushed her into taking care of herself, but didn't expect her to be a fraudster. Vicky felt she had finally broken free from the chaos of her home, but not in the way she had imagined. While in juvenile detention, Vicky reflected on everything. She realized that her actions, though born of necessity and desperation, had consequences that reached far beyond her. She had been so focused on surviving on her own, especially how her parents made her feel, that she hadn't understood the damage she was causing to others. The weight of her mistakes followed her for a long time, but for the first time in years, Vicky felt a flicker of hope. She could start over, maybe not in the way she'd wanted, but it was a chance nonetheless. She learned the hard way that escaping the storm didn't mean avoiding responsibility. It meant facing it head on and working to make things right. Years later, when Vicky was released, she had a new understanding of herself and the world around her. She still had a long way to go, but she wasn't the same little girl who had turned to fraud as a way to survive. She had learned not to cheat others just to escape any situation. She had learned to work for herself the right way without hurting others. The price of such secrets was far too high, and the only way out was through honesty and hard work. Hope you enjoyed this story, and see you in my next story.